Welcome fans and foes, viewers and haters. I'm your raging Canadian and here's today's review. Cowboy movies. Half of the new ones suck. Comic book movies. Half of the new ones really suck. So naturally, I'm almost downright terrified to so much as glimpse for even a second at DC Comics' upcoming Western adventure film, Jonah Hex. Apparently this movie's been in development hell for years, which isn't exactly a boost of confidence on my part. After all, how many movies that come out of development hell actually turn out pretty good? Indiana Jones 4, Hellboy 2, The Incredible Hulk, they're all mediocre at best. Well, I guess we're about to find out. The trailer opens up with Jonah Hex, played by Josh Brolin, being held back by a group of men led by a guy named Turnbull, played by John Malkovich. Turnbull holds Hex back while he holds his son hostage in the house. Hex pleads for Turnbull to let his son go, but he sets the house on fire to leave the boy to die. Card number 1. Familiarity. So this dark vigilante based on a comic book character is unable to save his family from being murdered by his enemies? Yeah, nobody's ever done that before. Twice! Well, Turnbull isn't finished because he decides to brand Hex's face to remind him of the man who took away everything he had, leaving him with a heavy scarring. The trailer says that some say Hex changed after that night, apparently giving him mystical powers. So he got all that from one branding. Then why isn't Texas full of Jesus beef? Apparently Hex now has the ability to return the dead to life with a simple touch. Oh hi again, familiarity card. You weren't gone very long, were you? So this depressed, vengeful cowboy protagonist is set in the Wild West with supernatural abilities and goes seeking justice against the one responsible for his grief. Once again, in a comic book movie. And you're not hiding anything when you're playing the exact same background music in both movie trailers. Furthermore, if Jonah has had these Deus Ex Machina hands ever since the night his son was killed, then why the heck wouldn't he just use said powers to bring him back? Oh, let me guess, because his son's remains are ashes, right? We just saw this guy vomit a bird. Unless a live crow was his lunch that day, he just created something out of nothing. Confronted by a number of thugs, Hex notices there are 5 coffins conveniently lined against the wall. He says that they might need 8. Wait a second. What? We can clearly see there are only 5 thugs ready to take him in. Unless there are more thugs in this scene, this so-called joke doesn't make a lick of sense. But hey, if that wasn't funny, then how about this for a stupid joke? Hex actually has a pair of machine guns strapped to his horse. You know what? I'm just keeping the familiarity card on standby from here on out. We already know that this cowboy wants to avenge the death of his family, but now you're actually trying to introduce scientific marvels that are clearly decades ahead of their set time period? Well, at least you're not borrowing from a comic book movie anymore. No. Now you're just borrowing from one of the worst movies ever made! Next we're introduced to Hex's love interest, a prostitute named Leela, played by Megan Fox. Prostitute, huh? So this is how far your thinking goes, writers? The bedroom? But hey, they're not entirely to blame for such a character. After all, Fox's southern accent doesn't sound believable in the slightest. Of course, because we're in the Wild West, a thug doesn't think Hex is so tough and asks what happened to his face. Hex sends the guy through a wall and replies, I cut myself shaving. What happened to yours? Alright, first of all, we've got another card to play here. Because who needs a personality? I'm awesome! Secondly, Hex was able to knock this man through a wall with whatever weapon he apparently had on him. If this man had been shot in the face with a physical force of that magnitude, his head would have flown clear off his neck. So clearly, you could have only shot him somewhere in the midsection. Hex's bad one-liners don't make any sense. Well, a group of men barge in on Hex and Layla getting foxy, and one guy mentions Turnbull to Hex, who draws a gun against him for even mentioning the name. we're shown a brief flashback to the beginning of the trailer to review the origins of Hex's scar and the burning of his house and son. Well, at least this card isn't familiarity. Here's a fun fact. The viewers aren't morons. We saw this scene just over a minute ago. We already know who Turnbull is and why Hex hates him. Why are you wasting valuable marketing time by re-showing the exact same scenes? Well, the government wants to hire Hex to kill Turnbull for unknown reasons. So Hex goes to his gunsmith to load him up on new weapons, asking if he has anything new. Oh, by new, you mean arsenal that won't exist for a good century or two? Of course. What's your interest today, Mr. Hex? Bazooka? Flamethrower? Atomic bomb? A government officer played by Will Arnett claims, "This is the future." No, this is the 1800s. You guys just think you're in the future because you're putting out more impossible scientific breakthroughs than an ATM puts out cash. While Hex and Layla start to dive into the action montage where we're shown that Turnbull apparently has a mechanical ship full of firepower. Not unlike another movie abomination mentioned earlier in this review, but hey, who's counting the flaws? We're also shown explosion after explosion after explosion. Is the entire Western population just made of dynamite? After the movie's title, Hex and Layla are shown tied up without their weapons. Hex says that they must have searched Layla thoroughly in order to get every weapon she had, to which she replies, "Wouldn't you?" Look, Megan, we get it. You're attractive. Well, I can honestly say that Jonah Hex's trailer is so far the worst movie preview I've seen for the year 2010. The dialogue sounds cheap, the creativity seems to be zip, and from the collage of clips alone, it already makes no sense. The only actors that seem to give this movie a glimmer of hope is Josh Brolin and maybe John Malkovich. You know a movie's gonna be bad when even John friggin' Malkovich can't save it. My rating is a 0.5 out of 10. Jonah, just thank God that your son isn't alive to see this movie.